Edition 111 in 3, 2, 1.
I was born woman, off my knees I will stand for my liberation. Sisters, rise again. I was born woman, off my knees I will stand for my liberation. Rise and rise again.
Greetings. Welcome to the 111th edition podcast of Women's Liberation Radio News for this Thursday, July 3rd, 2025. This is Thistle, wishing you a safe and happy 4th of July holiday season. This month's edition focuses on Pride 2025 in all of its gore, glare, and madness. Also in its quieter moments, like moments in the woods at a feminist summer camp in June. We'll hear an excerpt of an interview I did with Arianne, the Vice President and Secretary of LGB Alliance USA. She's a lesbian millennial from the West Coast with an interest in understanding sexual orientation, sex, and gender in different cultures and religions throughout the world. She also has an interest in critiquing the very idea of identity in all forms. Later on, we'll hear a Pride 2021 essay written by WLRN's Aurora, who had just become a member of the WLRN team when she turned in this essay. April Null loved it so much she made it into a recording that we will play on today's show as our commentary. The team at WLRN produces a monthly radio broadcast to break the sound barrier women are blocked by under the status quo rule of men. This blocking of women's discourse we see in all sectors of society, be they conservative, liberal, mainstream, progressive, or radical. The thread that runs through all of American politics, except for separatist feminism, is male dominance and entitlement in all spheres. To start off today's edition, here's our newest member, Kat Bradfield, with women's news from around the globe for this Thursday, July 3rd, 2025. Take it away, Kat.
Thanks, Thistle. I'm Kat Bradfield, and I'm happy to be taking over for Mary O'Neill after her 2 years of service as head of the World News Department here at WLRN. On Tuesday, June 17, British Parliament voted in favour of banning the prosecution of women who undergo late-term abortions. Whilst UK law had previously allowed for abortions to be performed by an authorised provider up to 24 weeks, with exceptions for cases such as risk to the mother's life, the new amendment proposed by Labour Party MP Tonia Antoniazzi prevents women who choose to terminate a pregnancy outside these rules from being prosecuted. The amendment does not include protections for providers, with the doctors carrying out abortion procedures after 24 weeks still at risk of criminal charges. The amendment passed with 379 votes to 137. Labour Party MP Stella Creasy put forward another amendment proposing full decriminalisation and enshrining the access to safe and legal abortion as a human right, but this was not voted on. A competing amendment proposed by Tory MP Caroline Johnson, which aimed to ban the sale of mail-order abortion pills, was defeated 379 votes to 117. In further news from the UK, the government has announced a ban on all pornography depicting strangulation as part of their pledge to halve violence against women and girls. The announcement, made on June 18th, is in response to the independent porn review conducted by Baroness Gabby Burton and published in February of this year. The review included 32 recommendations for ministers as part of a crackdown on violent, degrading, and misogynistic porn. On June 11, the majority female jury in Harvey Weinstein's retrial voted to once again convict Weinstein of sexual crimes after his 2020 conviction was overturned last year. The verdict in this trial was split, finding him guilty of one count of criminal sexual act in the first degree and not guilty of another, and with no verdict able to be reached on the charge of rape in the third degree. Also in the New York courts, the trial of rapper Sean Diddy Combs continues. with the defence spending only 30 minutes presenting their arguments compared to the 7 weeks taken by the prosecution to present testimony from over 30 witnesses, including former partners and employees of Combs. Combs himself did not take the stand and no witnesses were called for the defence. Legal experts say that Combs would have everything to lose and nothing to gain by testifying. Combs' defence argued that the prosecution exaggerated the case, showing only evidence of personal drug problems and a swinger lifestyle. In the final rebuttal to this, the prosecution accused the defence of making excuses for Combs, encouraging the jury to find him guilty and prove that he is not above the law. The judge will begin delivering instructions to the jury on Monday, June 30th. Legal action is set to be taken against trans-identified male Nicholas Sylvan Cantino, known online as Lily Tino, after he repeatedly filmed videos of himself in women's bathrooms and posted them on social media platform TikTok. Cantino gained online attention for his videos in which he berated waitstaff at restaurants for addressing him as Sir and otherwise not recognising him as female. On a recent trip to Florida, Cantino filmed a series of videos where he inspected and rated a number of women's bathrooms at Walt Disney World. These videos included Cantino taking selfies just outside the bathroom stalls whilst women were present. One woman pictured in Cantino's videos has announced she is considering pursuing legal action against him for violation of privacy, as taking photographs of people in public bathrooms without their consent is illegal. In the state of Florida, this offence can bring penalties of up to 5 years in prison. The Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency, the UK equivalent of the FDA, has issued a warning to women of the link between weight loss drugs and unintended pregnancies. New research has found that popular drugs used for weight loss, including Ozempic, Mounjaro, and Wegovy, may reduce the effectiveness of oral contraception. The impact has been attributed to gastrointestinal side effects caused by the weight loss drugs and has led to 40 reports to the MHRA of unintended pregnancies whilst using these drugs. Women are now being urged to use barrier forms of contraception whilst taking the weight loss drugs, and for up to 2 months after stopping the drugs if not trying to get pregnant. The MHRA also warns that these weight loss drugs must not be taken during pregnancy, whilst trying to get pregnant, or whilst breastfeeding. The MHRA's Chief Safety Officer also reiterated the advice that these so-called skinny jabs are medicines licensed to treat specific medical conditions and should not be used as aesthetic or cosmetic treatments. They are not a quick fix to lose weight and have not been assessed to be safe when used in this way. A new study presented at the 2025 European Stroke Organisation conference has revealed that taking oral contraceptives can triple the risk of young women experiencing a stroke. Research by Dr. Mine Sezgin, a neurologist at Istanbul University, found that for women between the ages of 18 and 49, those who used combined oral contraceptive pills had a 6 in 100,000 chance of experiencing cryptogenic ischemic stroke, compared to 2 in 100,000 for those who did not use the pills. The study looked at just over 500 women from 14 European countries and notes that the risk may be linked to the potential for increased estrogen levels to increase blood pressure and promote clotting. Medical experts do not advise discontinuing contraceptive use based on these findings, but are now urging caution when prescribing oral contraceptives to women with other health and lifestyle factors that increase the risk of stroke, and to instead consider other methods such as IUDs. On June 11th, the Women's Tennis Association announced a new rule allowing female tennis players to take time off to undergo fertility treatments such as egg freezing and return to competition with a protected ranking. The new rule aims to support female athletes in balancing family goals with career ambitions, and comes 3 months after the WTA began offering players up to 12 months maternity leave. US tennis champion Sloane Stephens said of the new rule, "I'm incredibly proud of our support in recognising the importance of fertility treatments for female athletes. For any woman, the conversation of family life versus a career is nuanced and complex. The WTA has now created a safe space for players to explore options and to make the best decisions for themselves. It's truly groundbreaking and will empower this generation and future generations of players to continue with the sport they love without having to compromise." The baby of Adriana Smith, a brain-dead woman forcibly kept alive by doctors afraid of breaking Georgia's strict anti-abortion laws, was delivered by C-section on June 13th. After the delivery of her son Chance, Adriana was taken off life support. There have been concerns for Chance's health due to the circumstances of the pregnancy and birth, but the hospital is unable to comment on individual cases due to privacy laws, instead releasing a statement saying it uses consensus from clinical experts, medical literature, and legal guidance to support our providers as they make individualized treatment recommendations in compliance with Georgia's abortion laws and all other applicable laws. Our top priorities continue to be the safety and well-being of the patients we serve. Georgia Republican Senator Ed Setzler chose to stand by the hospital's decision, stating that it was completely appropriate that the hospital do what they can to save the life of the child. and calling the situation an unusual circumstance that highlights the value of innocent human life. Many lawyers disagree with the interpretation of Georgia's abortion laws to include keeping a pregnant woman on life support for 90 days, echoing Adriana's mother's sentiment that the choice should belong to the family rather than the state, and that removing the woman's mechanical ventilation or other support would not constitute an abortion. Adriana's family and community gathered later that week at a church in Atlanta on what would have been her 31st birthday for a celebration of her life. Between June 19th and 22nd, 5 trans-identified males competed in the US Pro Disc Golf Women's Championships, taking home a total of almost $5,000 in prize money that otherwise would have gone to female competitors. James Nova Pollard took first place in the women's 55-plus division, claiming over $2,000 in prize money and his third major title in women's professional disc golf. Pollard's partner Salvatore Kimberly Gianola took second place in the women's 50-plus division, winning $1,100 in prize money. A third athlete, Logan Natalie Ryan, took 20th place in the Women's Pro Open division, taking home a $1,440 prize. Since 2019, Ryan has won 30 women's disc golf events and reportedly taken home over $40,000 in prize money. He was also responsible for the Professional Disc Golf Association removing restrictions on testosterone levels for trans-identified male competitors in 2022, bragging that he was ruthless in his legal pursuit. Male athletes Robert Amanda Branch and Ben Ember Simonis also competed in the women's championships, but did not place high enough to earn prize money. In 2022, a survey of PDGA members found that 80% of women involved in professional disc golf did not believe trans-identified males should be allowed to compete against women. The PDGA administration dismissed the results, arguing that people lie on surveys. Some people lied on this survey. In 2024, female disc golfer Kristen Late spoke out against males competing in the female category.
To me, it's obvious why there are 2 divisions. To me, it's obvious. I don't know. For some people, I think it's not obvious. I don't know. But I don't know if you guys can tell me one discipline where women have a better world record than the men.
On June 18th, the US Supreme Court voted to uphold laws in around half of the states banning cross-sex hormones and puberty-blocking drugs for minors. The case was brought by parents of trans-identified children in Tennessee, who claimed that the ban on these practices constituted discrimination on the basis of sex. The parents argued that they were being denied equal protection, as these treatments were permitted for use on minors with legitimate medical conditions such as endometriosis and early or late onset puberty. Chief Justice John Roberts rejected these arguments, stating that it is not the court's job to judge the wisdom or fairness of Tennessee's law, but rather to determine whether it violates the Constitution's guarantee of equal protection of the law. The court ruled 6-3 along party lines to uphold the laws. On June 11th, pop singer Sabrina Carpenter revealed the controversial cover art for her upcoming new album, Man's Best Friend. The cover features Carpenter on her hands and knees, looking into the camera whilst an unidentified man stands in front of her and appears to pull her hair. Whilst Carpenter, her fans, and the mainstream left media celebrated the image as sex-positive and empowering, it has drawn criticism from both conservatives and feminists. Domestic violence prevention charity Glasgow Women's Aid had this to say about the image. Sabrina Carpenter's new album cover isn't edgy, it's progressive. Picturing herself on all fours with a man pulling her hair and calling it man's best friend isn't subversion. It's a throwback to tired tropes that reduce women to pets, props, and possessions and promote an element of violence and control. We've fought too hard for this. We get that Sabrina's brand is packaged up retro glam, but we really don't need to go back to the tired stereotypes of women. Carpenter addressed some of the criticisms in a subsequent interview with Rolling Stone, in which she featured on the front cover almost completely naked. Despite these attempts to cater to the male gaze, Carpenter's fanbase primarily comprises young women and girls. In the interview, she doubled down on her sexualized, ultra-feminine persona being ironic and empowering. In Rio de Janeiro, a new law has come into force requiring the display of anti-abortion signage outside all government-run hospitals and medical centres. Brazil already has some of the world's most restrictive reproductive laws, with abortion legal only in instances of rape, risk to the mother's life, or if the fetus is found to have a fatal brain disorder. In recent years, the Brazilian government has attempted to further reduce access to safe abortions, with the largest hospital in Sao Paulo no longer offering the procedure due to pressure from the city's mayor. Only 4% of Brazilian cities have the facilities and trained staff to carry out abortion procedures. Anthropologist and reproductive rights researcher and activist Deborah Tiniz, a professor at the University of Brasilia, says this is a direct result of the Bolsonaro years in power, and that authoritarian governments in Latin America don't just disappear when their leader leaves office. Bolsonaro may be gone, but forces aligned with him and his ideas have occupied bodies like the Medical Council. Under this new law, hospitals must display signs with messages including, "You have the right to give your baby up for adoption anonymously, give life a chance," and "Abortion can lead to consequences such as infertility, psychological problems, infections, and even death." There is no medical or scientific evidence supporting the claims made by this second sign. The newly elected president of the International Olympic Committee, swimming champion Kirsty Coventry from Zimbabwe, has pledged her commitment to protecting the female sports category. Coventry announced in a press conference on June 26 that there is now overwhelming support amongst IOC members for protecting the women's sport category.
On the protection of the female category, it was very clear from the members that we have to protect the female category first and foremost. We have to do that to ensure fairness, but we need to do that with a scientific approach and with the inclusion of working with the international federations, whom have already done a lot of work in this area. There was an overwhelmingly support, I think. Not just the majority, but all of the members that were here present and those that were able to share with us before they left, that we should protect the female category.
And now, a report Jenny Watson of the L community sent into WLRN for our newscast today.
Hi, I'm Jenny Watson, founder of L Community, a female-only lesbian organisation based in London, UK. We run real-world events and built the first ever female-only lesbian app, which is available worldwide on Apple and Android. Back in April, I spoke with Thistle about where things were heading. So here's the update. Southwark Council, the London authority we applied to for our female-only lesbian venue, missed their final deadline. So we've now escalated and a legal case is underway. Our request was really very modest. We applied for one disused building, just a private, safeguarding based space because UK law protects that. Unfortunately, they refused, while funding every other group. We've now submitted the case to the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and if they don't act, we're going to pursue enforcement through the courts. As for the app, like I discussed with Thistle back in April, when we first launched in 2024, the app was flooded with men using female friends, so we shut down, redid the entire code, and launched again in February of this year. It's now been live for 5 months, and we're really happy to say that we've had zero abuse from men, not one breach. So here's the final update. The law is on our side, the tech is holding, and Southwark Council is now facing real consequences. If you want to join L Community, just go to our website at www.thelcommunity.com. So that's the update from L Community. Thank you for listening.
That concludes WLRN's World News segment for Thursday, July 3rd, 2025. I'm Kat Bradfield. Share your news stories, announcements, and tips with us by emailing info@wlrnmedia.com and let us know what's going on.
This is Joe Brew, and you are listening to WLRN.
Next up, we'll hear excerpts of an interview Thistle did with Arianne of LGB Alliance USA. Thistle and Arianne discuss what LGB Alliance is and the various actions and groups they offer, in addition to discussing Pride 2025 and what it means for lesbians in particular. Take a listen.
All right, so thanks for tuning into WLRN. I'm Thistle Pettersen, and I have the honor and privilege of talking with Arianne today from the LGB Alliance. Thanks for being on, Arianne.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Thistle.
Yeah, my pleasure. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about LGB Alliance USA and how you found them, or are you a founder, and what your role is?
Okay, so I personally found out about LGB Alliance USA, I want to say probably sometime at the end of 2021 or beginning of 2020, when I was really peaking on this whole gender thing. And I, in particular, wanted to find other lesbians who were peaking. And I think it was just probably on Twitter or something that I found out that they existed. LGB Alliance USA was actually founded in 2020. So I was not there for the founding of LGB Alliance USA, and it was founded when members of the UK LGB Alliance, so LGB Alliance started in the UK in around 2019, I believe, and they reached out to people in the US to come up with a team for an American version. And so that's what happened. And I reached out to LGB Alliance USA, and they asked if I was interested in maybe volunteering. And I said yes. And I ended up getting really involved. And so I'm on the board. I'm a vice president and secretary for LGB Alliance USA now.
Wonderful. And you do wonderful work. I watched your weekly news report this morning, and it was just so well done. I like how you have like a news segment where you report, and then you have a conversation, a dialogue with another, I don't know, commentator, journalist. So sort of processing and digesting what you've just reported on. So great work on getting the news out there, the LGB news out there on a weekly basis. What else does LGB Alliance USA do?
Well, thank you for your kind words on the news roundup. So because the U.S. is a very big country compared to the U.K., our volunteers are so scattered all over the country. We do our stuff mostly online. We have done a few in-person actions, but we focus a lot on community building online. So what we do is we have a schedule of Zoom events, and they're like for various groups. So like we have a lesbian social club, we have a lesbian and bisexual women's group, we have a bisexual women's group, we have a gay and bisexual men's group, we have a LGB collective group, and we have a book club, a neurodivergent support group. And we meet depending on the group, either once a month or once every 3 months or so. And the point is, there are so many people out there who are lesbian, gay, or bisexual, who just really are fed up with this whole gender ideology thing. And they don't have a community. All the community is essentially queer, LGBTQ plus alpha, omega, whatever. And they could be afraid of speaking out too, because of whatever could happen to them. So we are here so that people can go to our groups and they can speak and they can talk and they can ask questions and they can know there is a community behind us. And we also do we have a Substack as well. We invite contributions to the Substack from our supporters. And we have done some done some political work. For example, we sometimes submit statements, like when the whole proposed changes to Title IX, when there was an open comment period for that in the Department of Education under the Biden administration, we released submitted a statement for that. We've gone to in-person things, most recently last month. I came on behalf of LGB Alliance USA to DC as part of a coalition of organizations of women from various organizations that were going to talk to Congress people and their aides largely about women's rights. And also, I really wanted to hammer home the message that this whole what Democrats think is the LGBTQ agenda is actually harming lesbians. And and when I went to talk to them, a lot of these, most of them, I think all of them actually said they had not heard that perspective yet, the lesbian anti-gender ideology perspective. So
it's a good thing that you went there and you started a conversation with those particular Congress people and representatives. Speaking as a lesbian, I know what it's like, kind of going back to what you were talking about before. I know what it's like to go on a dating app today for lesbians and have almost every single profile be a male profile. I think, which is what you're describing, is one of the ways that lesbians in particular are harmed by the LGBTQ agenda, right? So there's the policies that are being made in Washington, D.C. that harm, but then there's also the social aspect and the fact that these men and so many women think that they do belong on lesbian dating apps, So we've got the political problem and we've got the social and the cultural problem that we are addressing. How many women, have you ever been to the Lesbian Social Club that meets through the LGB Alliance USA? How many women are showing up to that social club?
Yeah, so I would say it's usually between, in any given lesbian social club, it's maybe between 10 and 20 is probably the average that we get now, which is a pretty, I think, a pretty good manageable size once you get, too small or, it's a pretty good number, I think. But it really depends on the day and,
And then who's facilitating these groups?
Well, I'm one of the facilitators.
And what do you do at the group? Is it just a talking group, or do you all knit together and have activities? What do you do?
So usually we have a topic that we coalesce, we talk about, and usually it's just dialogue, but there have been some fun things that have sort of happened organically, like a time where we asked people to bring souvenirs from lesbian history or from their pride history, and as a result,
so cool.
Yeah, and it was cool. That one was nice because then we sort of we ended up coming up with a list of various books and movies and such that we thought were helpful. And so that's a lot of fun.
To your knowledge, have any women met in this lesbian social club and started dating?
In person?
Yeah.
I don't want to go into the details, but yes.
Because I know that will, attract a few women possibly to the lesbian social club. Is it kind of flirty or is it more business?
It's not flirty. I would not call the actual atmosphere of it's more of like a friendly
friendship based.
Yeah.
If you kind of like someone and you think there might be a spark, perhaps you could send them a private message in the chat because it's over Zoom, right?
Yeah, and we have, if you
do you have rules? Do you have rules?
We have a Discord too. So if you go to our Zoom events, you can get invited to a Discord. So there's sometimes more discussion that goes on there.
But as far as dating rules, are there any rules in these social clubs about how you approach another member of the club and what's acceptable and what's not?
No, I this is something that's most, sometimes people want to talk, people will meet, we'll say in the social club, oh, I'm interested in meeting people, and then sometimes through the Discord or through email, people can reach out, and then it just becomes a personal correspondence. So there,
LGB.
Yeah, it's not something, we're not a dating org, or
we're not a dating org. No.
I'm just saying it could happen.
Happen.
Take things off the record.
Social club. Who knows? You
Yeah.
your soulmate. We don't know.
Yeah.
But that's wonderful. I totally believe in developing female friendships between lesbians and how important that is for developing our culture and our counterculture to the dominant culture of the gender ideology, LGBTQ, WTF thing that's going on that's harmful, like you said, and especially to lesbians. So, awesome. Let's move on now. It is Pride Month, Arianne. We're still in June. By the time this interview airs, it'll be right around the 4th of July. But right now, we're still in Pride Month 2025. How's it going for you as a lesbian in the Bay Area?
Well, I have to admit, I have not done any Pride festivities this year. I did last year. I actually, just out of curiosity, there was a group of lesbians that I went with to check out the canceled Dyke March. People still showed up. It was just that the form
was canceled
last year.
Canceled?
In San Francisco, Dyke March was canceled last year, and they released a statement that gave a whole hodgepodge of reasons. And it sounds like the dispute on trans stuff might have played a role, but then they also brought up stuff like racism and other things. So who knows? But this year, I also went to a local Pride last year just to see a largely lesbian band perform. But this year I didn't go to any Pride related festivities. It's certainly around the Bay Area, you get, all sorts of queerified, progressified, like I was just at IKEA the other day and they have a progress flag outside and they have a lot of progress themed decorations inside. So, I'm not a fan of that sort of thing. I'm going to shortly, as of like the time of giving, shortly after the time of this interview, going to be going to a feminist camp out, and I'm going to be talking more about this topic. So that for me is like what I feel like will be a happy Pride close to this horrible month. I mean, I shouldn't say horrible month. Sometimes things, there's some good things about Pride and there's some bad things, but like,
well, originally Pride was intended for lesbian and gay people to gather together to come out publicly and not be ashamed, right?
Yeah, there are definitely, I am actually a defender of like the concept of it. And I think there would definitely be some value in it, particularly in actually educating us about our own history, rather than the fake history that's being rewritten,
right. Stonewall.
Right. Marsha P. Johnson started Stonewall.
Yeah.
Sort of
yeah. But the word pride, just to pick at that for a second, kind of invites men who are arrogant and self-entitled and feel like they can just go and take up a space and say, I'm a woman and I'm proud,
That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of that.
So if it were more like Lesbian and Gay Solidarity Day or Solidarity Month or something like that, or not solidarity because it's not intended for all. I mean, what is Pride exactly? Like, what is it meant to be? It's meant to be a celebration of lesbian, gay, bisexual people being normal, regular citizens in our society, treated equally to their heterosexual counterparts, right? Isn't that what Pride is about?
And the story I hear about that word pride, it is not so much like proud about just being same-sex attracted, but also proud about being out about it, or proud about that you're not ashamed. You're not ashamed. You're not like
exactly. The opposite of shame is this kind of pride that we're talking about.
Right.
Is feeling confident and holding yourself with esteem out for the public to see that this is me and I'm not ashamed. I'm proud of myself that I know who I am and I know what my sexual attraction is. And the thing about it for me that I am always trying to pick apart, I guess, is I don't want to be defined by my sexuality. I want to be, I feel like feeling proud of your sexuality, again, for me, especially in patriarchy, I don't really want to talk about my sexuality very much at all. I just want to be able to participate in it and not be harmed and not be oppressed, So I don't know. The word pride has always sort of bothered me, and it has turned into, a lot of big parades and fanfare, and it just feels so big. And I wonder if that word pride has something to do with how poofed up it is.
I hadn't thought about the connection between the sort of corporate craziness of pride and the actual word pride, and how that might play into it. I mean, corporations will just corporatize anything they can get their hands on. It's profitable enough for them. But yeah, I mean, there are definitely a lot of people who feel the same way you do about like how the term pride puts too much of a spotlight on your sexuality, and how that and the way that the other side will frame it is, well, you're not putting pride in the sexuality itself, but your resistance to the oppression, the heteronormative society or whatever that's putting you
proud of myself. That includes my sexuality. I'm not ashamed.
Right.
It's kind of what I think the original intention was with the word choice. But yeah, it's totally become something that it really shouldn't be at this point. Oh my gosh, I saw a man in the street today dressed like a woman, as you do in Madison, and as I'm sure you do in the Bay Area all the time too. And I just was so tempted, because I was just so tempted to call him out and be like, men pretending to be women is not cool, and then just like walk on and stuff. I wonder if we're going to get to a point where we're able to be that free to just be like, this is unacceptable. This behavior, this lewd, crude, and like overly sexualized. I mean, what pride has become is, when I first peaked, drag queens and trans were so different. They were supposedly so different. Well, now in 2025 on NPR, they're interviewing a drag queen and referring to her or him as she. And I actually remember there was an article, and forgive me, I won't be able to reference it, but I mean, it was back in 2014 when I was first getting started with this stuff, or 2016, around there. And it was basically a trans woman, a man who identifies as trans, getting really upset that people were lumping trans in with drag queens, that's a completely different thing, that this is not a fetish. My identity is not a fetish. It's my inner authentic self. That clearly, drag queens, that's a fetish. But now in 2025 with pride, I do not see a division between drag queens and trans women anymore. How about you?
No, I think that's a very good point, that there's been this cognitive dissonance that people have about like, trans is this very real identity that has nothing to do with any sort of, fetish or sexualization. And it's separate from the drag queens. But then at the same time, drag queens are conflated into it. And people are trying to say now, well, actually, drag queens are totally harmless too. Like, let's have drag queen story hour, and let's just put drag queens everywhere. Like, I was talking to some people who were involved in some like animal, or no, it wasn't animal rights. It was a vegan advocacy, and how they would have like some vegan event where they would talk about drag queens, or they had a drag queen like read a book, like the drag queen hour, but it had nothing to do with vegan anything. It's just put in there for fun. And so it's like so what is it? Like, no one's defining what trans is the issue.
Right. Which, when I listened to your news report this morning, I was like, yeah, that is a huge thing that the government, the courts, all of us need to grapple with. There's no such thing as trans. It's incoherent. The concept of trans is completely incoherent. So nobody is trans, right? Or we all are trans. If we, like it's an inner feeling. It's, how can you protect that as a social class in the law? You can't. And these judges in the Supreme Court are starting to be like, yeah, and but I mean, because the law is all about definitions, right?
Yeah.
So,
No, I was reading the Supreme Court's opinion in the recent Skermeti verdict, and it was, I think, Amy Coney Barrett in particular that really hammered home this message of like, trans isn't defined. It's sort of like an amorphous category. And how can we expand like civil rights legislation to this amorphous category that we can't really pin down?
wow, I wish they would have just talked to me in 2014. I could have told them that it was a scam. Literally, I have a song. I was trying to figure it out in my mind because I come from a, I would say more than a liberal. I would say that it's been like a progressive, very activist, anarchist, leftist background of activism. And I do songwriting, and I was feeling that cognitive dissonance, and I wrote a song called Trans. And the beginning lyrics are, trans is a liberal construct invented by white straight men that shuts down our discussions of their violent power, and then they win. Violent power begins with man over woman, and then it all spins off from there into this postmodern racist sexist nightmare. And that was 2014 when I was just I was connecting all the dots, and I was like, oh my God, oh shit.
And then
oh, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I was just gonna say it's ironic because they try to turn that narrative around by lumping trans rights as a civil rights issues like racism. And that's like what the progress flag represents.
Because it's a parasitic movement. It only exists by piggybacking on some other movement. I don't know when people on the left are going to start understanding that they've been taken over, by the trans, whatever it is, this social virus, this crazy blue and pink goo that we find in the churches, in the schools, everywhere, lesbian dating apps, everywhere, this baby blue and pink goo.
Yeah, no, and it's not organic. It's something that I mean, there is a financial motive for it, for why the sort of legacy gay rights groups like GLAAD and HRC, they get, if they're donors that want to set the agenda, then they'll do it. And like you mentioned, dating apps, that actually was also a peaking experience for me. There are many things that contribute to my peaking. I joked that like the world was conspiring to peak me, and eventually I had to see everything and put all the pieces together. But one of the big moments was on the dating app Her, which was for like whatever LGBTQ women. And and it was so. First of all, there was, the whole issue of men saying they're lesbians on the app. And also, I got an email from them and the subject said, microdosing, experience microdosing. And at first I thought, oh, maybe they're getting into like the cannabis business and they're getting like sponsorship from the cannabis industry. And I read the email, and they did have something about cannabis, I think, but the reference to microdosing was actually microdosing testosterone. And so, and I'm like,
dating app.
Yes, and I'm like, horrible. Oh my goodness, this is horrible. And it's funny, I when I tell this story to people, even sort of more normie types who ordinarily wouldn't be so engaged in this issue agree that's ridiculous. Like,
right?
What's the world coming to?
Well, and this leads me to my last question before we wrap it up. And what is the difference between lesbian pride and gay pride? What besides the B, what brings lesbians and gays? I mean, the B is, it's like LGB. It's lesbian, gay, bisexual. How are lesbians different as a category from the G, and even the G and the B?
Well, I mean, there's the whole additional layer of sexism and misogyny. This is where the term intersectionality really should be properly employed. Like, lesbians face the intersectionality of oppression of, homophobia and sexism. Of course, in practice, no one ever applies intersectionality to lesbians, only to trans. But yeah, I mean, it's the fact that women are sexualized heavily, and there's always been, even for non-lesbian, all women have such, are so vulnerable to sexual advances from men, from sexual harassment. And with lesbians, there's this additional feeling of like, because we by definition are not sexually available to men, that provokes a certain sort of rage and a certain sort of man.
Corrective rape.
Right. Yeah. It's and so that
bad women.
Exactly. So there is just that whole power dynamic, I think, is something that I would assume is different from lesbians and gay men. Now, there have been gay men who have increasingly so faced the similar problem of like women who call themselves gay men who are entering gay male spaces. I do think probably the power dynamics are different in that it's probably easier for gay men to hold the line than it would be for a lesbian to hold the line against, a straight man calling himself a lesbian. So I would say that might be the main thing that would be different between.
There's the organization in the UK called Get the L Out. Are you a part of any organizations like that, or are you pretty committed to, is your main I mean, you're on the board, you're doing the weekly news report. I'm just wondering if there is a place where you get lesbian only space on a regular basis, and maybe are working towards lesbian only space on a regular basis,
You mean in person?
Like, yeah, or in your life in general, online or in person?
Well, I mean, I've definitely met and networked, like, people who I've either met through LGB Alliance USA or through other groups. Like, there are a lot of lesbians that are involved in groups like Wolf. Right. Plus, you have,
which is a women-only group, but it's not lesbian only.
Not lesbian. And thing
what I'm trying to say is, what are your? I know we don't have that much time, but if you could try to quickly talk about lesbian separatism, if you have an opinion about that, if you think it's a worthy goal, maybe not for yourself, but it's not like you would be opposed to a Get the L Out organization popping up in the US, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, lesbian community is great. I have friends who are lesbian separatists, including one friend of mine who's like, been a long veteran in it. And I think a lot of people have misperceptions about it. I think, like, for example, a lot of people think it means you have to like go all the way out in the woods and buy property and live self-sufficiently. And, some people do that, and that's fine. But it also can just mean like you're living in a city and you just want to have a lesbian social group, and you can have house parties together, and you can, rent spaces together, and you just center other lesbians in your life. It doesn't mean you have to like live self-sufficiently on a farm without TV.
Yep. Absolutely. I think it also can be about how you decorate inside of your house. If you have only female imagery in your house as a way of creating that separate culture, that separate space that you live in. without having to go to a cave in the woods or something.
Yeah, or just in terms of, it could be like what music you're listening to.
Yeah.
It could be local bands. There's some local bands, go to women's bands that have lesbians, so there could be some good options.
Arianne, do you play the bass?
I do. I took up the bass. And recently, because it was always my lifelong dream to learn how to play a bass guitar.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Did you see that I asked you that question at FQT? When they called you a rock star, sister, I was like, hey, Arianne, do you play the bass? No, I didn't say the bass. I said, do you play bass?
Oh, I got no response. That. No, so I must have missed that. I was having
so many comments. But anyway, I'm glad I captured you on WLRN saying that you play bass.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's so cool. I love all girl bands as well, and there's not enough of them. And
I agree.
I'm glad you play bass. I'm glad you're doing the LGB Alliance USA. I'm really glad you came on to WLRN today.
Hi, it's Ann Castile here, WLRN's producer and sound engineer. I'm also the outreach coordinator for a pretty cool gathering that I think you should know about. The XX Amazons Uprising 2025 is taking place from October 2nd to the 6th in Northwest Arkansas. The uprising aims to celebrate and strengthen lesbian communities in the female-centered world. We welcome and encourage women of every generation, color, class, other diversity, and those detransitioning to attend. At the uprising, we have workshops, discussion groups, community activities, song and gifting circles, collective meals, and ritual and spirituality times. We're all volunteers, coming together to learn, network, and ultimately build a radical, lesbian, feminist future. To register or for more information, go to xxamazons.org/uprising or email us at uprising@xxamazons.org. I hope to see you there.
Since 2016,
empowering women to be the media
and reclaim the narrative.
Your grassroots community radio station.
By women, for women.
WLRN.
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 Now we'll replay an essay by Aurora Linnea as read by a WLRN member, April Nault. The title of the piece is Pride, Corporate Patriarchy's Celebration in the Streets. Take a listen.
In the storefront windows of the H&M, of Starbucks, of Nike, rainbows are breeding furiously amongst themselves, proliferating at an alarming rate. Rainbows are pulsing, throbbing. Rainbows are sending out tendrils, stealing in all directions, like kudzu. Someone tosses confetti into the air. Teeny-weeny tinsel penises showering down, sparkling to the sidewalk. A man in platform heels and a pink marabou-trimmed peignoir struts down the street, his sachet impeded somewhat by the vanity table around his waist. Giant tubes of lipstick and eyeliner sprout from either side of his platinum bouffant. Following him is a squadron of white men wearing black leather cop costumes. A young Latino man in Carmen Miranda drag throws bananas to children. Men and women, all of them sweating glitter and outfitted in matching neon hot pants, hula hoop together to a song by the Village People. A greased naked man rollerblades by. No, he's not entirely naked. Never have you been so grateful to see a gold lame codpiece. Goldman Sachs employees are out in force, flapping around the unicorn flags they found as freebies in their cubicles this morning. And what's that behemoth in the sky blotting out the June sun? Why, it's the MasterCard blimp. The banner that trails behind it, bearing the all-important affirmation, "Love is love." You have to get out of here, but you can't. You're surrounded. There's nowhere to go. Behind you, someone is screaming, Fabulous! The rainbows begin to burrow into your skin. It burns, itches. There's a tinsel penis stuck to your shoe. Someone hands you a sample-sized bag of rainbow Doritos. Welcome to Pride, capitalist patriarchy's yearly carnival of male-styled sexual freedom. It is unsurprising that Pride has denigrated as it has. Pride is, after all, controlled by men. So too the gay rights movement and the LGBTQ+ community. A disagreeable reality of the patriarchal society in which we live is that, lacking a proactive effort to overturn male supremacy, when men and women come together in groups, the men rise to power. They take over, and what was supposed to be shared territory becomes just one more zone of patriarchy. This is because men have more money and greater cultural clout, and because men are accustomed to being in control, while women are used to being secondary and subordinate, and also to serving men. Men are socialized to lead, women to submit to male leadership. The result is that men's values prevail. A male agenda dominates. In the case of the LGBTQ+ kingdom, the ruling males happen to be gay or queer, which may or may not be the same thing. One need not be homosexual to be queer. Indeed, I think the sole criterion is self-absorption. It is therefore gay queer men's values and gay queer men's agenda and gay queer men's power to which women are to defer. LGBTQ+ culture is gay queer male supremacist culture. And patriarchy voguing in a rainbow leotard is still patriarchy, sisters. The state of Pride today reflects the phallocratic program that festers at the heart of the LGBTQ+ movement. There is the obsessive assertion of the true self, apparent in the preoccupation with the individualistic discourse of identity, and the male self's absolute right to express its supreme uniqueness in the soppy, free to be you and me mantras, and queer posturing at rebel yell nonconformity, and most ominously, in the antipathy for whatever might curb self-expression or self-indulgence, including anti-oppression politics. There is the fervent worship of manhood and masculinity. Here we find ourselves confronted with the leather daddy, the gay cowboy in chaps, etc. There is also the infatuation with the man-made feminine, cherished in its most exaggerated forms by men as a never-drying reservoir of hilarity and erotic frisson, the natural complement to the masculinity they idolize. Hence the inescapable drag queens. Lastly, there is the credo of sexual liberalism, sexual freedom on men's terms, which translates roughly to unrestricted phallic access, the no-holds-barred gratification of the male self's every erotic desire. Gay sexual liberalism often reduces to a call for, as Bradford Langrock Roth so eloquently puts it, quote, "As much cock as I want, anywhere and any time, then life will be great," end quote. This vision of sexual freedom goes far to explain why pedophiles, sadists, and pornographers have received such a friendly reception. Gay queer male domination has meant that the radical, social, and political project for societal transformation some decades ago dropped off the LGBTQ+ to-do list. In the 1970s, the Gay Liberation Front may have had a genuinely radical politics. Some men in the movement understood the direct link between gay men's oppression and women's oppression. They sought to tear down the hierarchy erected by the gender system and eschewed masculinity and femininity alike as symptoms of male dominance. The GLF's radicalism flagged and faded, however, and by the late 70s, gay men had retreated en masse to their patriarchal comfort zone. Today, discussion of ending male supremacy has gone extinct. Certain LGBTQ+ organizations, notably Stonewall UK, have protested the lack of anti-racist consciousness and racial inclusivity at Pride, a valid complaint, no doubt. By reason of white supremacy, the ruling males of the LGBTQ+ have been unmistakably white in addition to being male. Yet there has been no equivalent public outcry about Pride's phallocentrism, in spite of evidence that conspicuous maleness makes the event less than inclusive of females. One recent survey found that 31% of LGBTQ women don't feel comfortable or welcomed at Pride events. In the words of Susan Hemmings, male brain death on issues of patriarchy is not confined to heterosexual men. For gay, queer men, and straight men alike, eradicating male supremacy is an unattractive proposition. What gay, queer men want from the gay rights movement is their rightful slice of male power and male privilege, not the elimination of that power. They want the approval of their heterosexual brothers, not for those men to cease being the golden boys of a corrosive world order. The object is gay queer assimilation into the mainstream. At their meekest, these men ask for tolerance. At their most grandiose, they hope for celebration. It is this absence of a broad-based oppositional anti-oppression politics that makes Pride and gay rights palatable to capitalist patriarchy and ripe for corporate colonization. Presumably, if the status quo were in fact endangered by rainbows and unicorns and love is love, we would not be able to purchase Pride Listerine. In a technicolor sea of gay queer male supremacy, the lesbians' options are limited. We can emulate gay men in their pious devotion to masculinity and manhood, style ourselves after men, and endeavor to incorporate glorified gay male sex practices like anonymous trysts unsullied by emotional connection in public restrooms into our romantic lives. We can embrace gay men's camp visions of hypersexualized uber femininity, doll ourselves up in rhinestones and red lipstick, don some fishnets and pretend that our self-objectification is a subversive parody, which it can never be. However performative we fancy ourselves in our sequenced bustiers, everyone else on earth will see us as women, being appropriately woman-like. We can form a lesbian ladies' auxiliary to support our gay queer male brothers, tirelessly fighting their fights, defending them from their persecutors, and generally acting as ego boosters and stand-in wives. Or we can buy a rainbow-wrapped cheeseburger from Burger King to signal our queer identity and tromp along after the boys, desperate to convince ourselves that this nonsense means a damn thing, because we don't know where else to go. Lesbians not wishing to partake in any of the above will have difficulty fitting in at Pride. Lesbians who are feminists, who love and center women, find ourselves no less alienated by gay queer male supremacist culture than by heterosexist male supremacist culture. We cannot merely team up to cavort with our gay brothers. Our position as women loving women in a woman-hating world is different from that of gay queer men. Our politics are different. We mean to uproot every ideology and institution of male dominion, because these tyrannize and traumatize women. Gay queer men mostly do not want male dominion to end, because they benefit from it. We demand an end to the gender caste system, because we understand it as fundamental not only to women's oppression, but also to the other oppressive regimes that define patriarchal civilization. Gay queer men mine the gender caste system for laughs and sexual excitement. gay queer men see sexual freedom in universal phallic access, unhindered by challenge or restraint. We are not so excited about this concept of freedom because we've seen how men use their penises to violate women and girls, and boys, other men, animals. Since gay queer men's aims are often antithetical to feminist lesbian women's aims, clashes are inevitable. It is a myth that gay men are natural friends to lesbians and women overall. This myth is based on the notion that, due to being low-status males perceived by straight men as more woman-like because they get fucked by men, homosexuality nurtures in males a special capacity to empathize with women. An alternative basis for the myth is the notion that, as a consequence of being fucked by men, or because they're into drag, gay queer men are literally more woman-like in some essential way. But being a low-status male is not equivalent to being a woman, nor does getting fucked by men or having an affection for frippery turn a man into a woman. Gay queer men are men, and unless and until they disavow male supremacy, any lesbian alliance with them will be tenuous. And when that alliance breaks down, lesbians unwilling to comply with the commands of the ruling males will be demonized and driven out of Rainbow Land. Lesbians who oppose gay queer males' sexual liberalism's transgressive desires for pornography, prostitution, sadomasochism, misogynist feminization, and pedophilia are derided as unsexy, censorious enemies of freedom. My partner and I have been known to put stickers printed with phrases like, "Men who hate women love porn," on the front windows of pornography shops in a nearby city. Several years ago, our stickering prompted a gay man we know to contact my partner, informing her of the hideous homophobia implicit in her putting anti-porn stickers on a queer porn store. He also threatened to expose her as a SWERF, sex worker exclusionary radical feminist, in a way that could have put her employment at risk. This treatment is mild in comparison to the attacks experienced by lesbians who dare to restrict male sexual liberties and trample upon the sacred male self by refusing to include males into their sex lives, even if those males call themselves lesbians. Lesbians who publicly object to recent redefinitions of the word lesbian that render it more inclusive of heterosexual men intent on manipulating lesbian women into having sex with them have been vilified as disgusting fascist bigots, compared to racists, threatened with violence, and harassed by their fellow queers at pride parades from San Francisco to London. Women have been targeted for abuse for carrying signs announcing straightforward facts like, "Lesbian means female homosexual." A male organizer at the 2018 Pride event in Manchester, England, stated that lesbian protesters with the group Get the L Out UK should have been, quote, "dragged out by their saggy tits." Pride in London organizers have said that such non-compliant lesbians were an evil needing to be, quote, "stamped out." The lesbian feminist Magdalene Burns' immensely popular YouTube videos pushing back against the LGBTQ+ vision of a more inclusive lesbianism made her one of the most notorious women on the internet. Although Magdalene died from brain cancer in 2019, she has been allowed no peace from queer vitriol. On Twitter, activists' missives announcing plans to, quote, "piss on her grave," end quote, abound. In a reversal that would seem paradoxical were it not for men's well-known loyalty to other men, gay queer men dedicated to championing homosexuality have become impassioned enforcers of compulsory heterosexuality for women. Not to love men is, in male supremacist culture, possibly the most execrable sin. Marilyn Fry once wrote, The LGBTQ plus camp's rancer towards lesbian women, unequivocal in proclaiming their love of women, not men, confirms how right she was. For males, gay, queer, or straight, women who say no to men are an abomination. In gay, queer male culture, just as in heterosexist male culture, women are expected to submit to men, fall in line, lie down, shut up. It is a seductive fantasy that, amongst gay queer men, women and lesbians will at last be on equal terms with our brothers, because we share same-sex attraction, and if we unite around that pivot of sameness, all the differences between our experiences, our social positions, our needs and interests will melt away, and men will esteem us as peers. But so long as patriarchy stands, this can be no more than a fantasy. Whatever color flag they might be waving, most men enjoy male power. They are disinclined to give it up. Men rule LGBTQ+. Men rule pride. And men do not tolerate self-determining, self-respecting, dissident women. Women who don't kneel before male authority. We are despised. We will be punished. It may be in our interests to develop alliances with men who share our goal of bringing down patriarchy, but we betray ourselves, stooping to collaborate with men who uphold it. Instead of getting cozy with the reigning drag queens and leather daddies of the LGBTQ+, we can embody our lesbian pride by getting the L out and veering off the parade route. There is somewhere else for us to go. We can return to our love for women and recommit to the perhaps less fabulous, but far more urgent, serious march towards the radical transformation of self and society. Let the men have their party. When we take to the streets, it will be in revolt.
Thanks for listening to WLRN's 111th edition podcast on Pride and what it means for women and lesbians. WLRN would like to thank our guest this month for sharing her views. Thank you so much, Arianne, for speaking with me. Until next time, this is Thistle signing off on another WLRN podcast.
If you like what you're hearing and would like to donate to the cause of feminist community radio, please visit our WordPress site and click on the donate button. Check out our merch tab to get a nice gift in exchange for your donation. And if you're interested in joining our team, we're always looking for new volunteers to conduct interviews, write blog posts, post to our Facebook and other social media pages, and do other tasks to keep us moving forward as a collective of media activist women. Thanks for listening. This is Kat Bradfield, signing off for now.
And I am Jocelyn, recently returned to the collective after a hiatus and glad to be here. Thanks for tuning in. Our handcrafted podcasts always come out the first Thursday of the month, so look for it on Thursday, August 7th. If you'd like to receive our newsletter that notifies you when each podcast, music show, and interviews are released, please sign up for our newsletter on the WLRN website. Stay strong in the struggle, and thanks for listening.
This is Anne, signing off on another edition of WLRN's monthly handcrafted podcast. You can find us on X, Facebook, Instagram, Spinster, and SoundCloud in addition to our website. Thanks for listening.
And this is Frida. Our monthly podcasts are always crafted with tender, loving care and in solidarity with women worldwide. Thanks for your support. We would love to hear from you, so please share, like, and comment widely.
But how will we find our way out of this? What is the antidote for the patriarchal kiss?